My younger brother, Daniel, has always held a deep grudge against me. If you assume it was due to envy, you'd be mistaken. He wasn't the overlooked sibling, he was the family's favorite. There was no reason for him to feel jealous. To provide some background, our mother always pampered Daniel. He was the cherished son in our household. She prepared his meals, washed his clothes, and even expected me to assist with his homework. I was supposed to support him simply because we were brothers, but I never received the same care. I accepted this, being naturally self-reliant. Perhaps I was partly to blame for always catering to his demands without expecting reciprocity. Daniel never offered help when I needed it and only approached me when he wanted something. While I was a reserved, studious kid who preferred solitude, he was boisterous and aggressive, much like our father. I'm also very direct and honest, never softening my words. I think my bluntness may have caused my mother to view me negatively. This favoritism made Daniel the family's star, and I didn't mind too much growing up. But trouble started when he began tormenting and ridiculing me for being different. He mocked my height and my glasses, sneaked into my room, read my journal, and then tattled to our mom about its contents. When I confronted him and complained to our parents about his invasion of my privacy, they brushed it off, saying it was no big deal. He did worse things, like nearly breaking my glasses and putting disgusting items in my food. Once he even hid small pebbles in my cereal, but thankfully I noticed them before they could harm my teeth. When I told my mom, she dismissed it, claiming this was just how brothers bonded. During our arguments, Daniel always targeted my vulnerabilities with his insults. We attended the same school, so he knew I was being bullied by some kids. Instead of defending me, he joined them, hurling names like pathetic loser or freaky nerd, and egging them on to physically harm me, calling me a complete failure. Once, during a petty argument I can't even recall, he told me to end my life. While I could shrug off most insults, that one cut deep, especially since I was grappling with my mental health at the time. I'm in a better place now, but hearing my own brother wish me dead was crushing. Since our dad was often at work and our mom didn't seem to care, she even blamed me once, saying I provoked Daniel. Things kept getting worse. In high school, there was a shocking moment when Daniel tried to set my hair on fire, and unbelievably, our mother defended him, insisting he was just joking. Who does that? Thankfully, my dad finally stepped in, recognizing the severity of the situation. He even threatened to call the police on Daniel. This was a wake-up call for my brother, who had never faced consequences before. He was genuinely shocked, and my dad made it clear that enough was enough. Daniel needed to respect his older brother. Later, Dad came to my room to talk. I never expected his support, as he often remarked on how similar he and Daniel were, which was true. He admitted he had hoped Daniel would grow out of his behavior, but he was starting to see that Daniel was becoming a real bully. Hearing this from my dad was incredibly affirming, and I nearly broke down. I poured out everything Daniel had done to me over the years, including the school bullying. My dad was stunned by how much I had endured. The next day, he spoke to the school principal to ensure the bullies faced serious consequences if they continued. That evening, he enrolled me in MMA classes at a local gym, saying I needed to toughen up and stand up to the bullies in my life. A nerdy kid like me learning to fight might have seemed absurd, but I was determined. I balanced my studies and workouts, and the MMA classes transformed my life and physique. One day, Daniel was up to his usual tricks. He stole my pocket money, which I'd earned from chores and saved up. I caught him as he was about to ride off with his friends on his bike. I demanded my money back, but Daniel taunted me, saying all I could do was run to Dad for help. Something snapped in me, and I punched him in the face. He fell back, stunned, and I grabbed my money from his pocket before pushing him down again. Daniel started crying loudly, which was almost amusing. My mother rushed out to check on him, and upon learning I'd hit him, scolded me, saying I should be a better example for my brother, who seemed to relish seeing me reprimanded. She complained to my dad about my behavior, insisting I needed to be disciplined. Dad calmly asked us both to explain. I told him how Daniel stole the money I'd worked hard for, while Daniel claimed he needed it for a date and that, as his brother, I should help him. Dad told Daniel he was lucky I only punched him, as anyone else might have called the police for theft. He stressed that Daniel had no right to take what wasn't his. Daniel threw a tantrum, likely expecting our mom to back him, but Dad stood firm. When Daniel realized he wouldn't be punished for being hit, he screamed that he hated me and locked himself in his room. After that incident, Daniel started keeping his distance. He realized he could no longer bully me, and even Dad had stopped enabling him. For the first time, I felt we were on equal footing. Though he couldn't physically harm me anymore, he resorted to muttering insults like geek or loser when our parents weren't around. His behavior grew worse with age, becoming more irritable and short-tempered. If I asked him something, he'd ignore me and walk away, grumbling insults under his breath. If he needed to communicate, he'd go through our mom instead of talking to me directly. When I asked her why Daniel couldn't just speak to me, she'd tell me to be more patient. I couldn't tell if it was puberty or genuine hatred. I repeatedly asked my mom to mediate a conversation to resolve our issues, but she always refused, saying she didn't want to get involved. When I asked why Daniel treated me this way, she dodged the question. Eventually, I left for my dream university on a scholarship as a top student. My dad threw a party for me, and even my mom seemed proud, but Daniel remained distant, barely acknowledging my success. The day I left for university was a mix of excitement for the future and relief to escape the toxic home environment. My first few months at university were freeing. I made friends, enjoyed my classes, and began building a life away from the oppressive atmosphere of my childhood. The constant dread of Daniel's verbal attacks faded, bringing me peace. In my second year, I met my wife, Sarah, at a frat party through a friend, and we instantly connected. Coming from a religious background, having kids outside marriage was frowned upon. When we found out she was pregnant in our final year, we decided to marry after graduation. Our wedding was a small but joyful event. Our parents were thrilled, and we cherished the celebration. At that time, I believed Sarah was my soulmate. I always wanted a monogamous relationship, one woman to share my life with. Despite other women showing interest over the years, I never pursued anyone else because I was truly happy with Sarah. She was my ideal partner, and I never wanted to hurt her. But later, I discovered two instances of infidelity in our marriage. One was an on-and-off affair with a married coworker that lasted years, and the other was a brief fling with an ex-boyfriend during a family visit. Some might call me naive, and in hindsight, I can't entirely disagree. Each time we separated briefly, but I chose to forgive her. I didn't want to raise our child in a broken home and believed we could move past it. The affair with her coworker happened when we were young, and I chalked it up to youthful errors. For a while, things seemed to improve. Though I could never fully trust her again, I tried to let go of my doubts, knowing forgiveness meant working toward a fresh start. It's been 4 years since her second betrayal, and I felt confident in my decision to give her another chance. Sarah seemed different, and we were happy, planning our family's future. But 3 months ago, my world collapsed when she admitted to a long-term affair and said our son might not be mine. Her words hit me like a freight train. Shock, betrayal, and disbelief overwhelmed me. I struggled to process the magnitude of her confession. In a daze, I asked why she kept such a massive secret and how she could do something so devastating. Her response was cold and detached, as if she were unaffected by the pain she caused. Her vague answers left me with more questions. It was a surreal, agonizing moment, grappling with shattered trust and uncertainty about my family. I pressed Sarah for the truth, feeling I deserved to know who the father of the child I'd raised was. She finally admitted it was Daniel. My jaw dropped as I asked her to clarify. She explained that she and Daniel became friends when I introduced her to my family, and she stayed with us from Thanksgiving to New Year's. Daniel, usually hostile toward me, was kind and polite to her, which pleased me because I wanted Sarah to feel welcomed. Sarah wanted to fit into my family, so she spent time with my mom whenever possible. She noticed the tension between Daniel and me and asked about it. I opened up about our strained relationship, saying we might never reconcile due to his unresolved issues. Sarah understood but began including Daniel in our outings, hoping it would help us bond. When we planned movie nights, she invited Daniel, and we watched his pics. During this time, Daniel and I exchanged a few words, which was progress compared to his usual silence. I recall Sarah and Daniel playing video games together, but I didn't think much of it. Sarah said that one day, Daniel confided in her about his struggles and a recent breakup. Feeling vulnerable, he formed a friendship with her. She mentioned he'd flirt with her harmlessly when I wasn't around, and things eventually spiraled out of control. The thought of my wife and brother being intimate made me sick. Sarah said she felt guilty afterward and left, which aligned with her sudden decision to go home instead of staying for New Year's. I tried to convince her to stay, but she insisted on leaving. When we reunited at college after the holidays, she seemed her usual happy self, so I didn't suspect anything. 2 weeks later, we learned she was pregnant. Sarah admitted she wasn't sure if the child was mine or Daniel's, and with no way to confirm, she chose to stay with me, knowing I was the more reliable brother. That's why we got married. My world felt like it was crumbling. The son I adored might not be mine. I asked Sarah if she'd been with Daniel recently, and she nodded slowly. She revealed they'd stayed in touch because their connection was undeniable. They'd sneak off to hotels, lying about working late. She admitted that half her business trips were actually romantic escapes with him. I asked why she married me if she wanted my brother, and she said she didn't want to end the marriage. She saw me as a great father and chose to stay. She called it a mistake she couldn't stop. I told her I appreciated her honesty but was leaving. She cried, begging for forgiveness, expecting me to lash out. Instead, I calmly packed my things. Sarah insisted that if I loved her, I should fight for her, saying mistakes happen in every marriage. When she saw I wasn't budging, she argued our son would suffer from a divorce, as kids shouldn't grow up in broken homes. I reminded her I might not even be his father, which made her cry harder and accuse me of cruelty. She seemed to think nothing could make me leave, perhaps because I'd forgiven her before. While I loved her, it felt tied to believing we had a son together and our shared history since college. Sarah kept saying it wasn't too late to fix things, but I couldn't believe her and had no patience left. Trust was gone and her words rang hollow. Even if I forgave her, I could never forget she was with my brother. I believe in forgiving human flaws, but this crossed a line. I left her crying at the door and checked into a hotel. The next day, I went to my parents and told them about Sarah's affair with Daniel, revealing how they'd been secretly involved for years. Their shock was palpable. True to form, my mother initially defended Daniel, insisting her son would never betray his brother. Determined to reveal the truth, I asked my parents to stay silent while I called Daniel in front of them, making him think it was a private call. When he answered, I confronted him about the affair. He denied it at first, refusing to take responsibility. But when I said Sarah had confessed everything, he blamed her, calling her untrustworthy. He claimed it wasn't his fault if women were drawn to him, boasting he was the better-looking brother. I told him I'd expose him to everyone. He mocked me, saying no one would believe me because he was the favored son. I laughed at his arrogance, thanking him for confirming the truth, as our parents had heard everything. Daniel went silent, then stammered, trying to explain himself. My mother, still in shock, demanded answers from Daniel. He fumbled through a weak defense, blaming everyone but himself and trying to pin it on Sarah. I could see my mother, once protective of her golden son, now grappling with disappointment and anger. In that moment, I felt a strange sense of validation. For years, I'd endured Daniel's torment, and now the truth was out, with him exposed. As Daniel's excuses faltered, my father, usually reserved, couldn't hide his disappointment. He asked me to hand him the phone and addressed Daniel. "Daniel," he began, his voice heavy with sorrow, "what you've done isn't just a betrayal of your brother, but of this family. You were intimate with his wife and continued the affair after they were married. Your actions have consequences and have destroyed our trust in you. I raised you both to value family, loyalty, and integrity. What you've shown today goes against everything I taught you." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Your disregard for your brother's feelings and disrespect for his marriage are unforgivable. You've hurt him and torn our family apart. Your mother and I are partly responsible for what you've become, but we won't tolerate this anymore. From today, you're cut off from the college funds I set up for you. You'll need to figure out how to pay for university yourself. I'm also stopping all financial support for your lifestyle. Do you think it makes you a man to be with married women? Let's see how you fare without my help." I stayed calm throughout. Though I wanted to yell at Daniel, watching my dad hold him accountable was the ultimate vindication. I'd exposed his true character, and he'd underestimated the consequences. My mother, despite Daniel's protests, still tried to defend him, but my father ended the call, cutting off Daniel's attempts to justify himself. Afterward, my mom hugged me, a rare moment after years of distance. In that embrace, there was an unspoken understanding and support amid the family chaos. She apologized for not believing me all those years. My 14-year-old self could never have imagined this moment of validation and connection with my mother. My dad helped me find a skilled lawyer to divorce Sarah. She and her lawyer played dirty, demanding alimony since I earned more, but her affair worked in my favor. A paternity test confirmed Daniel was the father of the child. a blow even more painful than learning of Sarah's infidelity. I was devastated that the son I'd raised wasn't mine. Sarah begged me to keep visiting him, saying he shouldn't suffer for this, but I couldn't face him. He reminded me too much of Daniel, and it hurt. After the divorce was finalized, I felt a wave of freedom as I moved into my own apartment. Living alone was surreal, as I'd married young and never experienced true independence. My self-reliant nature helped me adapt quickly, and I embraced my new life. 2 weeks ago, my dad called to say he was considering changing his will to exclude Daniel. Once he decided to cut Daniel out, he stuck to it. Daniel tried contacting our parents and even showed up at their doorstep, pleading for forgiveness, but they refused him entry. Even my mother, who usually caved to his tantrums, seemed done with him, though it must have been toughest for her. Daniel never reached out to apologize to me, showing he regretted only the consequences, not his actions. Friendly and complete. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, follow, and subscribe so you never miss any of our upcoming stories.